Welcome to the deep dive. You've shared your sources with us, and, well, our mission is basically to dig in and pull out the really core insights for you.
Exactly.
The compelling stuff, so you get a solid grasp without getting lost in all the details.
Yeah, we want to make you well-informed, but efficiently. We've gone through the documents you sent over, the details, and we're ready to bring the most significant bits to light.
Okay, great. So today we're diving into, well, the world of organized crime, but focusing really tightly on one group, the Greenwich Village Crew. You gave us excerpts from greenwichvillagecrew.pdf, and our goal, our mission here, is to unpack their history, look at what they actually did, and introduce the key players.
Right, sort of illuminate their role within that whole mafia ecosystem.
Exactly. Okay, so let's
Ooh.
get into this. What's the first thing that kind of jumps out from the sources?
Well, I think what immediately hits you is just the staying power of this crew. I mean, seriously.
Right.
Their roots go back to the 1920s.
The 1920s.
And they're apparently still active today, or at least remnants are. That's nearly a century.
Wow.
It's pretty remarkable, isn't it? Their ability to, adapt, law enforcement changes, internal power struggles.
Yeah?
Surviving all that suggests, well, a strong organization, flexibility, deep roots.
And maybe a strong code of silence.
Oh, absolutely, that too. And probably effective succession planning for a long time anyway. It
Yeah.
gets a bit murky later on, as the source notes.
Okay, let's rewind then. Back to the beginning. You said the 1920s.
Yep, the source states the 1920s, founded by Vito Genovese.
Vito Genovese himself.
Okay.
And the name, Greenwich Village Crew.
Yeah.
Kind of gives away the location, right?
It does. Greenwich Village, Manhattan. That was their original base. Makes sense. You establish your turf.
Yeah.
And that foothold in the village, I mean, even back then, it was a significant area. Controlling territory there would give access to all sorts of opportunities, legit and not so legit.
Right.
And the document shows how they used that base to expand. They didn't just stay in the village.
Where else did they operate?
Well, their territory grew significantly. We're talking the West Side, Lower Manhattan, parts of the Bronx, even up into Yonkers.
Okay, wow. That's a pretty big footprint across the city.
It really is. It shows ambition, right? They weren't content with just a small local operation. It suggests strategic thinking, wanting to control more rackets over a wider area.
So who are these guys? The membership. The source mentioned something about made men.
Yeah, it specifies the core members were Italian-made men, but they also had associates, guys from other ethnic backgrounds working with them.
And how many people are we talking about, roughly?
The estimate mentioned is around 30 individuals.
Okay, so what's the difference? Made men versus associates.
Well, being made is, it's a big deal. It means full membership in the mafia. There's a whole ritual, a lifelong oath, strict rules. They're the inner circle sworn in.
Gotcha.
Associates, on the other hand, they work with the crew. Maybe on specific jobs, maybe they provide a service, but they aren't formally inducted. Different status, less security,
Right, an inner circle and then a wider network.
Yeah.
And 30 might not sound huge, but you said they could wield considerable power.
Oh, definitely. In that kind of hierarchical structure, 30 dedicated guys, especially with the right connections, they could do a lot of damage, control a lot of turf.
And they had connections.
Yeah.
Alliances.
Yeah, the source says they were allied with the big five families, basically. Bonanno, Colombo, Gambino, Lucchese.
Yeah.
So they weren't isolated. They were plugged into the wider mafia network.
That must have been vital.
Absolutely. For protection, for expanding their operations. The source also mentions rivals, just calls them various gangs, doesn't name specifics, though.
Were those alliances always stable, do you think, or did things shift? Could they end up fighting with the families they were supposedly allied with?
That's a really good question. And, alliances in that world are flexible, let's put it that way.
Right.
They shift based on who's got the power, who wants what territory, internal family beefs. The source doesn't give examples of fights with allies, but you can bet tensions existed. It's a constant balancing act.
So what were they actually doing? What were their rackets? The source lists quite a few things.
Yeah, it's a pretty comprehensive list of organized crime activities. Racketeering, bookmaking, loan sharking,
Extortion, gambling.
conspiracy, labor racketeering. It seemed like they had their fingers in a lot of pies.
Labor racketeering, what does that typically involve? Like unions?
Often, yeah. Controlling unions, especially in industries like construction or trucking. Skimming funds, controlling hiring, that sort of thing. It can be very lucrative.
And the source highlights their control in downtown Manhattan specifically.
It does. It says they controlled many organized crime activities there. That underscores their influence in a really key part of the city.
Okay. And when it says racketeering, what does that encompass?
Well, broadly, it's running illegal businesses or schemes, but often for them, it would mean things like forcing local businesses to pay protection money.
Right. Or else?
Exactly. Or messing with legitimate markets to benefit their own illegal ones. Then you've got the more specific stuff mentioned, like gambling operations, loan sharking at crazy interest rates,
Hijackings.
hijackings, yeah. And just straightforward extortion of businesses. It really paints a picture of a crew woven into the city's underbelly, affecting businesses, individuals.
Definitely. Okay, let's talk leadership. Who steered this ship? It starts with Vito Genovese, the founder.
Right. Active from the 20s, climbs the ladder, becomes underboss in 31, then eventually boss of the whole Genovese family in 57.
That's quite a rise. Is it common for guys from one specific crew like Greenwich Village to rise that high even multiple times? What made this crew such a fertile ground for leaders?
That's a really sharp question. I mean, Genovese obviously had the ruthlessness, the smarts, the ability to build power, but maybe the territory itself played a role.
How so?
Well, Greenwich Village, even back then, was a hub. Lots of business, lots of activity. Maybe controlling that area gave potential leaders more opportunities to, make money, show their strength, build influence within the wider family. It could be a springboard.
Interesting theory. Okay, so after Genovese moves up, who takes over the crew itself?
Next in line, according to the source, is Anthony Tony Bender Strollo. He leads the crew from 31 right up to 59.
Long tenure.
Very long. He even becomes acting boss of the family for a bit in 59, but then disappears in 62, presumed murdered.
Oof, okay. Then
Tommy Ryan evilly takes charge from 59 until he also gets killed in 1972.
another one. Seems like a dangerous job.
Definitely. And during Eboli's time, his younger brother, Pasquale Patsy Ryan Eboli, and another guy, Dominic Dom the Sailor DeCordo, served as acting leaders at points.
So some instability there, maybe power struggles.
Could be. These transitions, especially the violent ones, often point to internal friction, different factions vying for control, or maybe law enforcement pressure taking out key figures. It highlights the risks involved.
But then comes a really big name. Vincent the Chin Gigante.
Ah, yes, the Chin. He takes over the crew in 72 after Eboli's death. And just like Genovese,
He rises to the top too.
exactly, becomes boss of the Genovese family in 1981. And he stays a major figure for decades, famously eccentric.
Right, the whole bathrobe routine, pretending to be mentally unfit.
Yeah, that whole public persona, it was a whole strategy to dodge prosecution, became legendary in a weird way. Definitely marked a unique era for the crew and the family.
Before Gigante became overall boss, there was an acting leader for the crew.
Yeah, briefly, Dominic Fat Dom Alongi from 78 to 81. He apparently retired to Florida after that.
A quieter exit. And after Gigante became boss, who ran the crew day to day?
That fell to Dominic Baldy Dom Cantorino. He led the crew from 81 until 93.
Okay, what happened to him?
He eventually retired, passed away in 2008. But here's where it gets interesting. The source notes that after Cantorino's death, the leadership of the crew is uncertain.
Uncertain. What does that imply? The crew dissolved, or just no clear single leader?
It suggests things might have changed. Maybe increased law enforcement heat made that kind of visible leadership too risky. Maybe operations became more decentralized. Or perhaps just a power vacuum. The source doesn't say definitively.
Now, the source mentions a specific place, the Triangle Social Club, 208 Sullivan Street, Gigante's hangout.
Yeah, these social clubs were classic mob fronts, weren't they?
Totally. What do we imagine the vibe was like in there? Just guys playing cards?
On the surface, probably. Yeah, low-key. Maybe some card games, espresso machine going. But behind that facade, that's where the real business happened.
Planning rackets, settling disputes.
Exactly. Strategizing, maintaining control, collecting money. The ordinary appearance was part of the security, hiding in plain sight.
Okay, and the source also lists a bunch of capo regimes.
Captains. Right, capos. Heads of smaller units within the crew. It gives you a sense of the structure. Cantorino is listed, with that note about his successor being unknown.
Who else is named?
Mario Gigante, Vincent's brother, right?
Yeah.
Dominic Sorello, Frank Condo, Venero Mangano, Louis Manadiola, Andrew Gigante, another relative, Vincent Esposito, Ronald Beliveau, Frank Caggiano, Giuseppe Della Croce, Joseph Denti, Sir Parada. Quite a list.
It shows the network, the different factions reporting up. And that uncertainty around Cantorino's replacement, maybe it points to a weakening of that structure.
It could, yeah. Or just a shift in how things are run now, harder to track from the outside, perhaps?
Finally, there's a mention of FBI surveillance photos. Gigante with Canarino and Gigante with Frank Condo.
Yeah, a reminder that even with the social clubs and feigned illness, law enforcement was always watching, always trying to piece things together.
Right, those photos are gold for prosecutors, I imagine, linking people together.
Absolutely. Crucial evidence in building conspiracy cases against these guys.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. This deep dive, based on your sources, it really paints a picture of the Greenwich Village Crew as, well, remarkably durable.
Definitely. Longevity and influence are the big takeaways.
We've seen its origins way back with Genovese in the 20s.
Its expansion across the city.
The wide range of criminal activities, from bookmaking to labor racketeering.
Yeah, and the key leaders, especially Genovese and Gigante rising all the way to boss of the family. That's significant.
And then ending on that note of uncertainty about leadership after Canarino.
Exactly. So we've basically pulled out the core story from your documents, the history, the activities, the key figures, their place in the larger mob world. Hopefully a good condensed understanding for you.
Absolutely. It leaves you with a final thought, though, doesn't it? Considering this crew lasted, in some form, for nearly 100 years, weathering leadership changes, murders, prosecutions, massive societal shifts, what underlying factors really contribute to that kind of resilience in organized crime groups like this? It makes you wonder, what keeps them going against all odds? Something for you to ponder.